Okay, so welcome back.
Hi.
Owen, we're here to talk about foundation apprenticeships that have just been released. In the digital sector, we've got the two, the hardware, and then we've got software and data. We know there's other versions of foundation apprenticeships which we're not currently delivering, so we'll concentrate on those two if we can. So what's your initial thoughts around the foundation apprenticeships that's been launched?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think it's one of those things that shows that apprenticeships are moving to a more kind of customer-focused base. There's a need for those entry-level apprenticeships to come into the marketplace, and from what I've seen of them, they seem like they're going to give apprentices a good grounding in a number of disciplines, which they can then, especially in the hardware and the software disciplines, where they can then see where their progression is going to go in the years following that.
And it's interesting because we've been told for many years that there's a need for foundation apprenticeships level 2 and entry level. I think there is still a concern, and we'll probably address it in a bit more detail later, about the RPL and how that affects people that progress on to the level 3s, which I think has been probably one of the biggest questions we've received in the few months leading up to this. But the change to terminology, I think, is the big one for everybody to try and get their heads around. So we've got now assessment outcomes, we've got performance descriptors, complete different analogy to what we've done before. And then, gateway to completion now instead of gateway. There's lots of new terminology. So let's focus on some of them and talk about, let's start with assessment outcomes.
Yeah, I think with the assessment outcomes, it's more pressure now on awarding organisations or EPAOs, as some of us are currently known as. It's looking at the curriculum. There's going to be more pressure on the curriculum teams as well to design a course that actually enables those apprentices to get that underpinning knowledge and skills. We'll leave behaviours to one side for a minute. But I do think it offers a great degree of flexibility as well, but still that responsibility, ensuring they're getting those foundational elements in there, especially around the hardware, software, thinking about progression routes that maybe they have in their own organisations, but actually listening to employers as well. I think that kind of convergence and the emergence of new technologies, it's important that all providers think about how they're actually blending that into their curriculum, but still keep an eye on those assessment outcomes that the apprentices need to be able to demonstrate.
And our job across those assessment outcomes is to make sure there's no duplication of assessment across each of the K and S's within the assessment outcomes. But it has been predetermined in the foundation apprenticeships. There will be a knowledge test, and then there will be a second method, as we know, which is we won't disclose what we're proposing to do that at the moment, but we need to look at those assessment outcomes, and as defined in the latest update that's come out, of what the knowledge has to link to in assessment outcome 1 as an example. So I think it's on us now, as you just said, about working with people's curriculum teams, whichever, but for them to understand what they need to make sure they're covering to meet that knowledge test, but also what links to the knowledge test and what links to the alternate assessment method.
Yeah, I think on the knowledge test basis, it's looking at how they're going to structure their programs. So at what point in their training, in that curriculum, are they going to deliver some of that underpinning knowledge, working with those organisations to see when they want to have the tests delivered, making sure those tests are sort of broken down into their key component parts. But I think there's a balancing act in not putting under the apprentices or the foundation apprentices under too much pressure, but having a look at how that curriculum design is actually focused to meet, what the employer is going to have them doing. Because not forgetting, they are going to be in the workplace, they are going to be picking up skills within the workplace, and what foundation knowledge do they need to be able to develop those. I think when you're looking at the skills element and the other assessment outcome, it is also we're thinking about actually how do you make sure some of those outcomes are integrated, so it isn't just standalone skills that we're testing, but actually how are we testing those in activities that they will be undertaking, hopefully, and practicing in the workplace.
And those skills are really important, that they'll be progressive And obviously we'll look at how that fits into the other assessment methods that we're adopting. But I also think it's vital that there's this on-programme element, and then there's what we come to gateway to completion, and at the end, this synoptic summary of what they've learned in those skills and putting that together and what that means. And I think, again, over an 8-month period, it's being realistic what can be achieved and what can't be achieved in the timeframes.
Yeah, and I think it's also remembering they're level 2. So again, this is this challenge where we're building the kind of assessment methodology, and we're supporting our customers in how they develop their curriculum. It's remembering these are level 2, so this is an entry to the profession. They're still going to need some of that fundamental underpinning knowledge, but there is still going to be that opportunity to work with employers to say you're going to have to give them exposure to some areas, perhaps of the business, which will be outside of their fundamental role, because if you look at the assessment outcomes, that's what they're going to get tested on.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a good time to come back to and revisit the point we talked earlier, which is that RPL, or the progression. There is a lot of conversation around this, that the foundation apprenticeships are at £4,000, and if they progress onto a level 3, what does transfer look like, RPL look like? Does it affect the funding? And I think it's really key to pick up on that point that you've just said there about these are level 2 apprentices, and therefore the curriculum needs to represent that. Yes, there's always bits that we know when you deliver a knowledge can only be delivered at one level and might overlap in other areas, but those skills need to be at level 2, not at level 3.
Yeah, and I think as well, as when you look at that RPL and when they're moving potentially into level 3, the really good employers and really good providers I've seen who do this, they can stretch their imagination, they can stretch the exposure, they can look at what they need to actually achieve within the business. And especially in our sector, when you're looking at some of the digital apprenticeships, that ability to bring in new emerging technology that maybe perhaps wasn't even around when that apprentice was undertaking their level 2 qualification, that's for me how they're going to be able to stretch and actually show that they are, delivering considerable, additional learning when they're going on to level 3.
Okay, so let's go back to the new word of performance descriptors. Then, I mean, again, there's lots of conversation around this and what they mean. They're one-word examples of how we interpret that. I think it's going to be really key on us to explain how we interpret them and what our customers should expect from those performance descriptors. We have to stay comparable. We can't change those in any way. But I think it's important on us to make sure our customers understand how we interpret those individual words so they can work towards those performance outcomes.
Yeah, I think whether it's T-shirts, whether it's hats, whether it's pens we give out that say, have a look at the documentation that's required as part of your foundation apprenticeship. We can no longer say just read the assessment plan. It's actually work with your awarding organisation to actually understand what's in the curriculum, what we mean by certain terminology. And then people need to audit that against their own curriculum. This isn't a kind of cookie cutter approach where you say, well, we've delivered this before as maybe a boot camp or a discrete kind of program, so we'll do it for foundation apprenticeships. It's about looking at what are their objectives, what outcomes are they looking to deliver as part of their curriculum, and making sure they're talking to their awarding organisation so they understand the requirements. Nothing more devastating than talking to an employer and a provider or a coach towards the end of a program. So obviously they'll get a bit of on-program assessment and they haven't quite understood the requirements of the program. So I think the role of the awarding organisation is going to be paramount in that.
Yeah, I think that the big change, which really aligns to that now, is, in the current landscape, apprentices are registered 9 months, sometimes 3 months before EPA. These need to be registered at the beginning with the EPA and AO. So having that integration at the beginning and the collaboration means that everybody's understood it from the beginning and what they're all working towards is the same outcome. I think it's going to be really crucial now, that partnership.
Yeah, and I think foundation apprentices understanding who their awarding organisation is, being prepared to ask questions, being prepared to look at documentation. it's ownership. So it's a real ownership, both from us as an awarding organisation, the employers, the provider, the training provider, but also the apprentice, and understanding, what is part and parcel of their kind of qualification. I think that's once people grasp that and they understand what's required of them, that's where you start to see those performance improvements and the achievement rates and the performance, both by apprentices and coaches, trainers, and assessors as they move through that qualification.
And I guess the big question around how does this change for your ops team? The registrations at the beginning, there's going to be on program assessment and scheduling, and then at the end, obviously gateway to completion. How does that affect your team?
We don't stop learning. And I think it's important, both yourself, myself, when we're working with people in the organisation, I learn every day. Every day is something new that's cropping up and happening. So it's that support. We're going to be running 2 different sort of assessment qualifications alongside each other. We'll have the standards that we already deliver, and then foundation apprenticeships are a new way of delivering things. So again, it's how we're supporting them, but they're supporting our customers in taking them on the journey with us. So, good documentation, seeing how we can utilise technology. There's a few things which I won't give away now that we're working on in the background to see how we can use technology to support us and our customers in making sure they're aware of what they need to do and how to contact us.
And I think that's the big thing. It's that the contact is, don't sit there in the dark. If you've got a question, ask. The team are very responsive. They've always been. We get really good compliments about the team. So they're there to support. Don't sit there and think, oh, well, we should know this, but we don't, or haven't seen this. Ask. And again, I think in our guidance documentation that we're producing, they will look different to our existing documentation because we have to adapt them to these. So it will take people a period of time to work out what's in that documentation and how they need to apply those changes. So reach out and ask is I guess the message.
Yeah, and I think I keep an eye out for some of the content we'll be putting out on LinkedIn. I think when we're putting on webinars and we're encouraging our customers to talk to us, there's certain key points where we're going to be engaging with people, and it's important that providers have the right people that we can contact as well. So I think it's thinking a bit laterally. How are they supporting their coaches, trainers, depending on their delivery model? It's not just kind of the EPA coordinator and maybe their quality coordinator that needs to be engaged with us. So again, we utilise kind of EPA Pro as our core kind of platform. And I know there's some developments there that are going to be taking place. So again, it's how they engage with us and get in contact. But it's always the first point of contact for us. Ops team, there are eyes and ears, and they are hungry to learn more and give their benefit of their experience in how we're going to deliver these qualifications.
And any last thoughts on foundation apprenticeships?
I think it's just the opportunity. It's always the challenge. People say, well, central government policymakers don't listen. It's something that's been asked for. And rather than saying there's always going to be areas of unknown and things that are going to need to be developed, and we'll see how they develop over time. But it's just take the opportunity. So embrace that opportunity. I think we've got to be a bit evangelical, especially for employers, so they understand the opportunity as well. And it could be a great introduction for new entrants into the digital market space.
Yeah, I think that's the key for me. It does open up the market space. It goes back to not necessarily the focus on the 16 to 18-year-old apprenticeships, but it does open that door now for people who want to come in at the entry level and progress on the career, which over the last maybe few years, we've seen less people doing that of the opportunity. So I think for employers, the message out there is, even if they're not doing it at the minute, but they want to have a discussion as well, and we're open to that discussion with the employers as much as we are with the training providers. And I think it's going to be that collaborative approach that makes sure they get the best experience and start on that journey in this instance, the digital industries, but it's the same for other industries, the other level twos.
It's not often a qualification comes out that has such a broad scope. So quite often employers and providers will say, the scope of the role is too narrow. Well, this is actually the opposite. It's fairly broad, so you don't really need to decide in which area they're going to specialise in. So it is foundation in name and foundation in the opportunity as well for those individuals.
And the hardware one is specific to digital.
Yep.
Okay, the software stroke data is probably more applicable across other roles outside of the digital field itself. So actually opens up a wider audience that can engage in that standard.
Yeah, there's not too many roles out there where digital isn't involved. Even if you look in farming, I was down in the southwest earlier, sort of a week or so ago. And again, if you look at any of that, the amount of digital application that's there in the machinery and what they're actually doing. So there's not many occupations where digital hasn't got a factor.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thanks for your time again, Owen.
No problem.
I appreciate that. And we'll catch up soon.